Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur, and we are less than a week, 5 days away from Inter Miami kicking off their 2026 season in Los Angeles at the Coliseum. Does it feel like game week to you? Because it's here, man.
It is MLS week. It isn't Miami playing their first game of the 2026 season week, but it doesn't feel that way. I also was telling you this weekend has been so full of sports for me that I just generally haven't got back into the MLS Miami mode yet. So maybe next week when we're doing the pregame show and we're hyping it up, and this time it's not going to be a 5 hour long pregame show, unfortunately. I think I'll get into it. I'm just excited for this team to start playing already. It just feels like a really long preseason, even though it was shortened by a lot. And it's just been a weird preseason. It hasn't felt like we have had consistent games and news coming in, and we've often had to filibuster on a lot of our episodes. So bring on the games, man, because I am ready to talk about what this Inter Miami team looks like on the pitch rather than talking what ifs and what could happen.
Yeah, especially this preseason, right? We're used to 5, 6, 7 games, and we only got 3. And not only did we only get 3, but we had a 2-week break between our third and then the first game of the regular season. So it is strange. We haven't maybe got back into regular season form. We didn't get a full preseason as podcasters, and so I think that's holding us back a little bit. Today we're talking about the midfield and the defense because I think it's much better. I think the midfield is going to be much better defensively. I think the defense got an upgrade in personnel defensively, and I think our goalkeeper is much better. So I feel pretty good. I think they're going to give up way fewer goals than they did last year. And that's my preview.
So is that the episode?
Should we Happy President's Day, guys. We'll see you next time.
That's the nuance and analysis that you come to the Drive Pink Dialogue for. I think there's more to it than that. It's very easy to say that it's better. We always talk about Inter Miami and what it would be like on paper and then what it actually comes to. We all thought Lujan would be a great addition to the squad last season until he showed that he's unable to play in the MLS. We thought this defense was going to be better with Falcone and Noah Allen in it, and it took time for them to get going. So there's still nuances that we need to figure out, and we're not sure how it's going to play out practically, but we can always speculate and we can always provide our judgment. And I think you're right to at least initially say that this looks better defensively. We should be better defensively as a team just by the kind of players we've signed, by the way certain players have slotted themselves into the starting 11, and also we have upgraded on quality in certain positions. So yeah, you won't be wrong if your thesis at the start of this episode is that Inter Miami is going to be defensively much better than last season.
Okay, before we get into it, let's just address the elephant in the room. Messi.
Hopefully it's a rabbit, not an elephant.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, an elephant could be useful. Just park him in front of goal, and we could win a lot of games. He got a sort of pulled hamstring a week and a half ago now against who did we play third? Barcelona de Guayaquil. In Ecuador. They canceled the Puerto Rico game because he wasn't going to be able to play in it. Sort of some things we heard over the weekend was that it was going to be a 2-week injury. And you kind of realize 2 weeks from when he injured it is the start of the season against LAFC. So I think it could be a 2-week injury and also him play the first game. But we haven't gotten any more clarifying updates other than he did do some training and individual work yesterday. So I still think he's going to play this Saturday.
I agree with you. I think they wouldn't have pushed it back to 2 weeks later, and by that I mean the game to 2 weeks later, and play that then if Messi would not have been available. There's still a chance that Messi is unable to make that game, but I think the expectation from the health department, the coaching staff, is that Messi will be available in the next 2 weeks. So that's a good sign. It's a positive development. And then the second thing is Messi's already back on grass training individually, which is definitely a good step in the right direction. And 2 weeks should be more than enough for him to get back some health, get back to playing with the team in training, and then hopefully he'll be back very soon. I hope he's available for that LAFC game. I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to sit that game out, given how much Inter Miami has to travel, and then maybe he's available for the second Inter Miami game after in the middle of the season. It's a very weird situation, but I have a feeling that if he doesn't play that LAFC game, it'll be because of travel. So then he'll probably go play that second.
Yeah. Okay. That's our update on Messi. Let's transition, because if Messi's not available, you know what they're going to have to be much better at? Defense, shot stopping, midfield play, if they still want to win games against good teams like LAFC. So let's get into it. Here's my biggest question. Last year, they had a bunch of midfielders and a bunch of center backs. If you go back to when they started the season last year, you had Kremaski on the roster, no longer. Busquets on the roster, no longer. Redondo on the roster, no longer. Center back, you had Toto Aviles, no longer. David Martinez, no longer. You had more first-team type players at center back in the central midfield pivot that you don't have this year. And obviously they brought some guys in, but the overall number of players that you would feel comfortable with putting out there has dropped at least by one per position group. So first things first, does it matter? Is this better? Because you don't have to worry about rotating. You don't have to worry about guys getting their feelings hurt because they're not playing. And maybe there is enough versatility within the personnel groupings that you can sort of fill in case you have an emergency. Let's start with the midfield. It feels like we're going to go into a season where Yannick Bright and Rodrigo de Paul start, at least to kick off the season, as the two central midfield players, and then David Ajala is a guy who can come in and probably rotate with either of those positions. You get three really good defensive midfielders that I think you feel pretty good about in the double pivot. Maybe David Ruiz can factor in there, and that's probably it. How are you feeling about the midfield?
I'm feeling a little distracted because apparently.
All right, why don't you turn it up?
Yeah. Well, I'll let you talk a little bit more.
That sounds much better right now.
Okay, so I'll keep it to that, and then if it cuts out, then let me know. Okay, so our midfield options, I think this is a really interesting question about the depth itself, because there's two different answers to this. So I don't know how you want to approach it, but generally my opinion about the midfield depth, you've got a 4-4-2 midfield with two-man pivot, basically. So essentially we're assuming there's going to be two players in the midfield this season. Rodrigo de Paul, Yannick Bright will potentially start with David Ajala as your backup. I think the drop-off in quality is not as high between the three of them. Of course, Rodrigo de Paul is going to be a featured starter in most games, but even the Yannick Bright Ajala pivot, I'm quite comfortable with in terms of what they bring on the ball and how they would fare up against a lot of the MLS midfields. But is that enough? Because last season we had options, and it was good to have options. You had Benjamin Kremaski, Federico Redondo. Well, David Ruiz is still there, but the drop-off in quality from, I think, an Ajala to David Ruiz is maybe slightly more. I won't be as comfortable with a midfield two of David Ajala and David Ruiz, the two Davids. So it'll be interesting to see how we actually maneuver the combinations. I think Rodrigo de Paul, as I said, will likely play every single game. And last season, it was an anomaly that we basically had Sergio Busquets and Rodrigo de Paul play more than 80% of the games that were available to them. And we didn't actually pick up an injury doing that. I think Javier Marchano was very comfortable with that. He liked the fact that he had players who were available at all times. But I'm not sure if that's going to be the case this season either. Last season, we played we had the most number of games played by an MLS side in one season last season, correct?
Yeah.
And if we plan to go far in a lot of tournaments this season, it might actually be the same. But Are we going to get the same level of luck when it comes to injuries, when it comes to form? Sergio Busquets barely had a dip in form. Rodrigo de Paul, questionable, but he still put in really good performances. How's that going to play out? So there's a lot of questions. I think we have two different streams of thought here that we should address about how Javi Mascherano wants to play and whether the depth is actually good enough to compete on multiple fronts. And there might actually be two different answers to each of those questions. But in my mind, I think there might be room for another signing, another midfielder to play as part of the midfield too, not the wide midfielders that we talk about.
It's weird because you're right. Last year and in previous years, they had plenty of options. And, specifically about, like, for example, David Ruiz, I think we both are comfortable with David Ruiz on the field, but it doesn't feel like Javier Mascherano is in the same way. So it does feel like they have three guys for two spots and they're going to rotate. And you think back to last year, and I mentioned some of the guys that are no longer on the team, it almost felt like once the season kicked off, Mascherano had trouble sort of finding everyone appropriate minutes and appropriate roles on this team. And we saw Kramaski play out of position, and we saw a rotation between Yannick Bright and Federico Redondo that wasn't necessarily what it should have been. And then a lot of those guys kind of left the team in the summer because it wasn't right for them and the way everything was being handled. I think Javier Mascherano likes to have a smaller squad, that he doesn't have to rotate a ton, that he doesn't have to sort of manage when they're not getting as much playing time. It's easier to just play your guys and to have your guys and to play your guys. And so for him as a coach, I think this is what he prefers. Three guys, two spots. Rodrigo de Paul will play 90 minutes almost every game, and Yannick Bright will play 65 or 70, and David Ajala will play 20, or Ajala will play 65, 70, and Yannick Bright will play 20, whatever the game situation dictates. So all three of them will play every game, and it's quite easy to keep them all happy. It's not what I would prefer as a coach, but I can understand it from Javier Mascherano's perspective. The question is, if something goes wrong, what do you do about it? And by something going wrong, it could be a number of things. A player could not live up to the expectation. Now, I think we've seen Yannick Bright do it. I think Rodrigo de Paul is going to have the opportunities, but maybe David Ajala doesn't adapt to this team, for example. And as we talk about other positions moving forward, there's some other new faces that maybe don't adapt as well as we would want. And then the other aspect is, of course, you could have an alien abduction where a player doesn't make themselves available on a consistent basis for periods of the season because they've been abducted. So if either of those situations happen, you kind of are pretty short on options. Let's put it that way.
Screwed is what you're trying to come to. Can we stop there for a second? Because I do want to address the first point of this. Javier Mascherano does not have the best rotation policy. He does not like to play with a big squad, as you mentioned. And in that sense, I think it is okay to go in with a short-handed squad. And maybe not a short-handed squad, but a smaller squad. It allows him to manage the men around him better. He can put people into roles. He doesn't necessarily have to keep everyone happy. And that's just the style of management that he prefers. In that sense, I think we have enough bodies in the midfield, in the sense of this being a Javier Mascherano squad and the way that he rotates. Is that enough, though, for us to compete for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, Leagues Cup, MLS Cup, Supporters Shield? No. I think you do need that extra body in there, even if it's somebody who's maybe not the level of Yannick Bright, David Ajala, Rodrigo de Paul, but somebody who can come in and do a job, even if it's a youngster. I think you have to have that backup. And for all we know, Javier Mascherano might actually have an idea of who he wants to be that backup. Maybe someone like Santi Morales could potentially play. I don't believe so, but maybe that's who Javier Mascherano is considering. You've got Keenan Hott coming up as well. So maybe that kind of a body is someone that Javier Mascherano is considering as a backup option in case what you just laid out goes to happen. But I still think that rotation policy that Javier Mascherano has, for that, the squad might be fine, but you have to think about the bigger picture And that's when I think we lead into your second question of, boy, if somebody loses form, does not live up to expectations next season, God forbid, has an alien relationship, all it takes is that one thing to go wrong for this cookie to crumble, because we're on thin ice when it comes to that.
Well, I want to be clear. They have emergency options, right? Like David Ruiz is, I think, much more than an emergency option. I think he can and probably
I
will get
agree.
playing time. And then beyond that, Segovia can play in the midfield. Ian Frey can play in the midfield. You have the young kids, like you mentioned, Keenan Hott, a super draft pick, Alexander Shaw, a young midfielder that they seemingly like a lot. So there are options you can put in the midfield. I don't want to make it sound desperate, but it's just like the plan is to go with three guys, and we have to be clear about that. And then take that same conversation and move it to center back, where two positions, and it feels like you have three guys you feel good about in Mikael, Noah Allen, and Maxi Falcone. A fourth guy who probably even more than David Ruiz, you don't feel good about having to start if you have to put him there in Gonzalo Lujan. And then some emergency options. Ian Frey can play center back. We've seen that a little bit. You have some young kids, a draft pick and a first homegrown player that can sort of do it in Talabi and Tyler Hall. Except with center back, you also have to worry about Noah Allen potentially getting stolen as your left back because we don't know about the injury health concerns with Sergio Reguilon. So this feels same conversation, except even more desperate, where if everything goes to plan, I think you feel pretty good about two of Noah Allen, Maxi Falcone, and Mikael starting every game. And if you need to take one off the bench because someone gets a cramp or something, you have a guy. You feel great about that. In fact, of those three, you might expect all three of them to play almost every single game. But if anything goes wrong, it feels concerning. And this, even more so than in the midfield, I think we have bigger concerns.
You know what it's like? It's like a string that's been stretched out to be its maximum taut level. The slackness is entirely there, and all it takes is that one extra pull and it would snap. I feel like we're at that point. The House of Cards is fully built. It looks really pretty, and I think everyone's enjoying what they see. But all it takes is that one card to fall for the entire thing to crumble. I don't want to be negative about it. I think Inter Miami is in a very good place. And as you said, I think that's an important point to drive home. We have emergency options. So it's not a desperate situation. We're not going to be stuck playing a midfielder in the back line like Tata Martino had to at times. But I do think we should consider the option side of things. And with the centre back, it's a lot more precarious because now you've moved out Noah Allen to the left back side, which would have been the case either ways. I wouldn't have expected Sergio Reguilon to play every single game. So Noah Allen would have had to play double duty, sometimes left back, sometimes centre back. But at the start of the season, he is going to be deputizing in left back for at least, I would say 5 games, 6 games, maybe more. So you essentially only have 2 starting options in centre back. And, well, Ian Frey, Gonzalo Lujan, but the backups don't necessarily put me in as much ease as maybe the midfield does. So definitely not a precarious situation, but one switch could make it a precarious situation. Let's put it that way. Regardless, I think we still have options and good enough options to do a secondary job.
It does feel like if you could add one player to this roster, it would be a center back.
I think that's the right thing to say. Just that one would make me so much more comfortable.
Almost as if you could add a center back who might also be able to deputize as a midfielder.
As a midfielder, I was going to say.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Yeah. If only Inter Miami had someone like that recently, but not the point. Okay, let's get to the bigger picture because I do think that's maybe the biggest concern. And so just to put it out there. But on the other side, they did go out and get a lot of exciting players. And just for a second, I want to talk about the goalkeepers because I do think they upgraded the goalkeeping situation in a pretty significant way. And so whether you go with Dane St. Clair for 34 games this regular season, or you go with Rocco Rios Novo for 34 games this regular season, I think that's a big upgrade from last year. But just in the midfield and defense, is the personnel better? Because it's certainly different. They lose Jordi Alba, they lose Sergio Busquets. So it feels silly to ask whether they are better, but they might have the best center back they've ever had. They upgraded on Chelo Wegan, I think. They got a Premier Leaguer to play Jordi Alba's role, and they didn't replace Sergio Busquets, but they got a decent MLS, like a MLS guy that has proven it in this league that he can do it. What do you think?
Without delving into the nuance first, I think the delta is very skewed in this conversation, so we might need to actually dig down into what we say. But at the top, bottom line, no. I don't think we've upgraded the midfield and the defense, because losing the likes of Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba is like losing major gems, and it would be very difficult to replace them.
Let me stop you, because I think we all get that, and so maybe it's not even that interesting of a conversation. Did they do as good of a job as they could have replacing them? Maybe is the better way to frame it.
I don't think so. I think they got very close.
And again, I'm not just talking about those two spots with Ayala and
Reguilon.
I'm talking about the entire defense and midfield. Did they do as good of a job as they could have to prepare this team to do what they want to do?
Here's how I'm going to answer that question. I think we're 97% there. The 3% depends on whether David Ayala actually integrates himself into the squad. His performances and how he actually plays in the midfield will determine for me how the coaching staff approach this. And I think that's a valid point to make, because we haven't necessarily seen him fully embedded into the squad yet. So I think they tried exactly what they should have done. The moves that they made were exactly what they should have done. There was no way that you could have upgraded the same level of skill and quality that Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets had. So you had to look for players who were athletic, who would incrementally make improvements across the back line and the midfield. And I think they managed to do that. It's just a matter of whether the likes of Sergio Reguilon and David Ayala actually work well with this team. On paper, I think they're very good players, and exactly how you would have approached a potential refurbishment of your midfield and defense.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other aspects to this. They did re-sign Ian Frey, Noah Allen, and Yannick Bright. So if any of those players had left this offseason, we would be having a very different conversation. You get Yannick Bright specifically, who was sort of limited in his game time last year, is going to have more opportunities. And then David Ayala obviously is not going to be Sergio Busquets, but he's a guy that's proven in this league. He's young, and hopefully he can show what he's shown already in the MLS. Sergio Reguilon, a little bit more of a question mark, but then you include the goalkeeper, which we already talked about. You include Mikael, who I think is a fantastic, potentially life-changing, as we will talk about in a few minutes, type of addition. And I think they've done as well as they could have. I want to give them a lot of credit, because I think this back line is going to be really good. This midfield is going to be not as good, but better in certain ways. I think it's going to be much more defensively sound. I think they're going to do a much better job of sort of keeping the back line safe and protecting them. And then, you're not going to get the same level of production from your fullbacks, but, you're going to have to get that from your brand new number 9 DP striker, and hopefully Matteo Silvetti with the whole season will have an opportunity to make a big impact, and Tadeo Allende won't have his slump. And so, you can map out a way this is really, really nice, even though you lose Busquets and Alba.
It won't be the same. It'll be different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Wise words.
I know.
Okay. Someone in the chat goes, I know you guys love Bright, but Ayala will start over him come crunch time. I want to talk about the new additions and where they fit in our opinion, because I do think there has been some real assumptions made about some of these players that I certainly don't necessarily agree with, and I want to get your take on it. But let's start with what I think is the easiest one. Mikael, I think he's the number one center back, period. And if it doesn't work with Maxi Falcone, he's going to get an opportunity to try with Noah Allen. Do you agree?
from what I've seen of him in the 2 preseason games, I need 5 more of him in my back line, and we'll be champions in no time. He is here to be a starter. He's here to be the number one, first name on the team sheet potentially after Messi.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll talk about him more in a few minutes. Sergio Reguilon. Is he the number one period at left back? Or is
Yes.
he going to start as the number one, but maybe there's wiggle room? Like, for example, last year, we saw Rodrigo de Paul come in. Maybe he wasn't playing particularly well, and I think there's an argument that he was being outplayed by other midfielders at certain points. But he was Rodrigo de Paul, and they paid a lot of money for him, and he's, of course he was going to be locked into the number one spot. Are we giving that same credit to Sergio Reguilon?
I think so. I also think he is better than Noah Allen at left back. Noah Allen has played centre back a lot more recently. And I know he's a good left back, but Sergio Reguilon is a out and out left back who's been playing this trade for his entirety of his career, which includes Premier League experience. I think quality wise he is better. It's only a question of whether he can be healthy or not. He'll fit into the MLS, in my opinion. I think his motivation levels are going to be there. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy or not, and he will be the starter in my eyes.
I'm 97% of the way with you.
Yeah.
Mostly because I think he's going to be good. But I would be curious if it doesn't go as well as we hope. And who knows what it's going to look like because we only got 12 minutes of it in the preseason. Okay, I think it gets a little more difficult from there. We've got Facundo Mora right back. I have seen some people assume Facundo Mora is going to be the starting right back this year. And I think that's crazy. When you look at who this player is, he's a guy that left Racing as a free agent and is signed for $600,000 US. There's nothing about this player's profile, the roster construction, the commitment to this player that makes you think he's going to be locked into the number one spot like a Mikael would be. So I do think there's like a misunderstanding of what he is this year and what he could be this year. I think they wanted to go out and get an upgrade on Chelo Weigant and a guy that can compete with Ian Frey. But to me, that is a straight up competition through and through. Like it's just 1A, 1B, whoever plays better is going to get the job, especially when you factor in they had to re-sign Ian Frey and give him a new contract. Is that how you're reading it?
Wait, I didn't necessarily follow your last point there. You think it's a competition between Ian Frey and Facundo Mora to see who plays better?
Yeah.
I think Ian Frey is going to start the season as the preferred right back choice. And I don't think he gets displaced.
Do you think that's because he's won a competition or because it was his job to lose?
I think it was his job to lose. I think Javier Mascherano went into the season knowing that Ian Frey is going to be his number one right back. That's my assumption of this.
Okay.
I think the way he's been used in the preseason, I think Javier Mascherano is clear that Ian Frey is going to be starting. I don't think we've seen enough from Facundo Mora to even suggest that he'll be able to displace Ian Frey on a long-term basis. Again, only a limited sample size. There might be a case that, okay, if Ian Frey is lacking in fitness, is not necessarily putting in the numbers that we expect of him, then maybe give Facundo Mora a choice. But I think at this point, it might actually be when we need to rest Ian Frey, that's when Mora plays.
Okay, maybe I didn't explain it well. I'm talking about the plan coming in. And what we just described with Sergio Reguilon is a guy that he's coming in to be the starting left back.
Yes.
Are you implying that you think Ian Frey came back as the starting right back and Facundo Mora as a clear backup?
Yep.
Okay.
That's my understanding of the situation.
I would have said maybe it was a battle that I felt pretty confident Ian Frey could win, and probably will win. But I still think it's open for challenge if that happens. Where I'm not so sure about the left back. And then David Ajala, same thing in the midfield. I think it's the same thing. I think him and Yannick Bright are battling for one spot, and I don't think anyone should just assume Ajala is going to get that spot. I know he had the most number of takeaways defensively of any midfielder in the MLS last year, but Yannick Bright had the most on a per 90 basis. So in terms of when he was actually impacting the game on the field, Yannick Bright was even better. So I don't know if this idea comes from maybe a lack of respect for Yannick Bright or putting too much on David Ajala too early. But these are two guys who are sort of early 20s midfielders that have already shown they can be really talented players in the MLS. I don't understand why anyone would think one player over the other. And if there was one, it would be the guy that's already done it with this team before. So I think that's a straight competition, straight up, just like I do with right back.
I think that's the competition there. Maybe I think for right back, it's a little bit 70-30 in favor of Ian Frey. I think with the centre backs, with the defensive midfielder situation, Yannick Bright versus David Ajala, they might actually end up playing similar number of minutes at the end of the season. I think they're going to be used on a rotational basis. They might actually have the same level of impact, similar level of impact once David Ajala gets fully embedded into this team. And it will come down to, okay, who does Javi Mascherano think is having a bigger impact? And that player will play in the big games. Yannick Bright was eventually able to make himself come out on top against the likes of Redondo. I won't be surprised if he does the same against the likes of David Ajala. But I think this is a very healthy place to be as a team because you have, in my eyes, two very good options, and whoever's better is going to play. It's as simple as that. Is going to play the more important games. Let's put it that way. I think both of them are going to get starter level minutes, as you like to say, but the player who's going to have the most impact will play the more important games, such as the CONCACAF Champions Cup or the knockout games.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at a situation where they both play every single game. It's just one plays for the first 8 minutes and the last plays the last 15 or whatever makes sense for the game situation. But I think anyone that thinks Ajala is Argentine, he's going to get the spot. Anyone that thinks Ajala is a U22, he's going to get the spot. That Ajala is some sort of talent.
No, let me say this: if they think Ajala is going to, sorry to cut you off, but if they think Ajala is going to displace Yannick Bright because of his talent level and stuff, that's completely understandable. That's what we're trying to say as well. That okay, whoever performs better is going to play. But I think if there's an assumption that Ajala is going to come in and be an immediate starter without having Yannick Bright compete for that position, I think that's maybe slightly misplaced as a judgment.
Yeah, there was a situation over the last 2 years with Federico Redondo, who they spent a lot of money on. And he had the prospect, the sort of hype, the reputation. That I don't even think exists with David Ajala in the same way. So I think Federico Redondo got a lot of extra playing time because of those sort of ancillary things that I don't think Ajala will get in the same way. So I think it's going to be who's the better player is going to play. I really do.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that it? It's all the new signings, new major signings in the back line? Okay.
Didn't we get Tristan Blackman?
I wonder if they've given him a contract extension yet. That'd be interesting. Okay, let's talk about fullbacks because we got a lot of production out of our left back last year. I think it's fair to expect a pretty substantial decrease in the number of goal contributions we get from our left back position this year. What do you expect from our fullbacks in terms of getting forward and being a part of the offense?
Who are you assuming are starting fullbacks?
Well, any of them, all of them.
I think we're going to get a little bit more this season from Ian Frey, just by the nature of balance that we need to bring in after losing Jordi Alba. With Jordi Alba, of course, we had all these goals and assists, but you have to agree that it was slightly skewed towards the left side of the pitch. We were unbalanced in that sense of how we would build the play. This season, we might see a little bit more of a balance, and we'll have to see more of a balance to find the same level of production or even chance creation as we did under Jordi Alba. So I expect Ian Frey to be a little bit more adventurous going forward, put in some of the crosses. We saw glimpses of that in the preseason, not nearly enough. But I do think given the profile of a player that he is, how he actually likes to play, the fact that he's very good with the ball at his feet, can travel with the ball, can beat a player or two, I would not be surprised if he has some of the burden to try and create those crossing opportunities from the right-hand side of the pitch, especially with someone like Bertarame sitting in the middle. I also think if Sergio Reguilon's on the left-hand side, he will be a lot more adventurous and forward-going compared to someone like Noah Allen. I think Noah Allen, by nature, with the way that he plays, is a little bit more conservative. And Sergio Reguilon has a whip on him, has a good crossing. So I think it's the balance of the fullbacks that you play that will determine how much creativity we'll get out of them. But it's not nearly going to be the same level as Jordi Alba. So we will also have to go through the middle. But I think Ian Frey and Sergio Reguilon, in my eyes, are the more offensive looking fullbacks compared to, well, I haven't seen enough of Moura, so I don't want to comment there. But compared to Noah Allen on the left-hand side, I think we get more from Sergio Reguilon.
Yeah, I've seen some people in the chat and you also talking about Noah Allen as a left back, and I think people should be cautious about making assumptions about what he is as a fullback. He hasn't played fullback in a long time, and
exactly,
he grew up as a fullback. He profiled as a fullback his whole life, and he learned, I'm sure, a lot from Jordi Alba. So give him a few, give him 10 games at left back before you actually assume what he is as a fullback these days, because he hasn't shown what he is in that role in a long time, since he's established himself as a first-team player. Big picture, I am a little curious what this looks like from our fullbacks, just generally speaking, whoever it ends up being, because last year at the beginning of the season, we got very little production from our fullbacks. Even Jordi Alba. Yeah. They were not particularly aggressive. They were much more focused on creating a sound block defensively, and it worked for the first 8 games, and then it really didn't work. And part of the evolutionary process of our team last year was, I think, kicked off by making our fullbacks be a bigger part of our offense. We saw a couple games where we went to a 3-man backline so that we could have both Jordi Alba and Ian Frey high up being attacking options. Remembering that San Jose game where we ended up scoring like 3 or 4 goals because that was like this new aspect of our offense that we were trying to unlock our team, because it had gotten so regressive and conservative. But now that you don't have Jordi Alba and you do have some new weapons offensively, I do wonder if we're going to see us reverting back to what we saw at the beginning of last year, which was our fullbacks really not getting forward much. And maybe some involvement in terms of ball progression, but certainly not in terms of final third, final product. I'm curious and maybe a little concerned is maybe the wrong word, but like I am keeping my eye open for that.
I think you make an excellent point, because this is probably Javi Mascherano's team now, right? Last season, you could say there were, of course, we had some players from Tata Martino's time. Javi Mascherano didn't necessarily have the full say in the off-season. We made some decisions about the rosters before he actually came in, such as bringing Cello Egan back and a couple of others. I think now that he's had the chance to have a say on who he wants to bring in, maybe the assumption is, okay, we're going to bring in players who are defensively solid because I want to play that solid low block and rely on my front players to do the offensive work and not my back line. Maybe that's the idea. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but you make an excellent point that maybe Javi Mascherano wants to revert back to that style of play that we saw in the first half of the season. And maybe he thinks it's going to look a lot better this time around because he's bringing in players who can fit that mold, both offensively, bring in more offensive players in the sense that they would have more quality and production up top, and also bring in more defensive-minded players who will be able to shore up the defense a lot better. So maybe that's the thinking that's gone behind it. I don't want to comment on whether that's good or bad without seeing what it looks like, but generally a very curious thought, and I think you make an excellent point there. I wouldn't personally want to see that team go back to what we saw last season, but hey, this is Javi Mascherano's team.
Well, and listen, maybe Mascherano saw what happened last year, and either says we have to be more expansive in how we build up
Yeah.
and produce in the final third. And even if it's not game plan A, like you would imagine he'd be quicker to go sort of attributes, build some of that into the offense quicker now that he saw what happened last year. Okay, let's just talk about some individual players because I think there are some really interesting conversations. Starting with, is Mikael going to change our lives?
Yes. Wholeheartedly, yes. I think this might be the best defensive player we've seen play for Inter Miami. I've seen 90 minutes of him, I think, maybe less. He looks like a beast. He looks comfortable on the ball. He looks commanding as a presence, but also in organizing the back line. He looks like a true leader back there. And I won't be surprised if he emerges as one of those leading voices in the team who, after Messi and Rodrigo de Paul, is the one that everyone looks up to because he's a presence in the field. When he first came on, I still remember that game, the second game that we played in preseason. He was not on the official team sheet that Inter Miami had posted online, so I wasn't expecting to see him on the pitch. And then Javi Marciano brings on this big dude in the 70th minute, and I was texting you on the side. I was like, "Who is this?" Because I thought if this is an academy player, I was thinking bring him into the first team fold immediately because he looks fantastic. And then I realized it's Mikael, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna have some fun." I think he's Maxi Falcone, just better in a lot of different ways. As I said, imposing presence, looks good defensively, has speed on him, is a burner, I think. Can play with the ball at his feet, can find a really good line breaking pass. We saw him make some lovely passes throughout the game. And I think he's going to be a huge piece, not just in stopping those big strikers that we go up against, covering up for some defensive issues that we faced in transitions, but also building up from the back because we're losing Sergio Busquets' ability to build the play. So maybe he's going to be a very important ball playing center back that will help us progress a lot more offensively as well.
Yeah. There's also going to be no excuse with set pieces this year. Inter Miami is going to have replaced either Maxi Falcone or Noah Allen in the back line with the 6'3" Mikael. You add a 6'3" goalkeeper instead of much shorter goalkeeper, and they should be much better on set pieces this year. I think he's going to go a long way there. I wonder if he's going to be a guy that gets 2 or 3 goals a year on attacking set pieces. But I think you're right. Like, this guy's a great find from Inter Miami, and I want to give them more credit because I think they did a fantastic job this offseason. This guy might be the most impressive addition because of sort of the mechanisms you pulled to make this happen, and to get him on this sort of level of financial commitment is fantastic. Superstar. I'm again, I've said this already, but like, I'm just already sad that we're not going to be able to bring him back next year because I think he's going to be such a transformational piece.
Also, MLS experience.
He was really good in the MLS with Houston, and I have zero doubt, and I think everyone should be prepared for this, that he went to Palmeiras, played 2,000 minutes, so he played a full season. I know he kind of lost his spot at the end of the year, but he played a full season's worth of minutes, and he will be much better than he was a year ago when he left Houston. So I am phenomenally excited about this player. I think he's going to be a superstar for this team, and it does... This is the kind of player that you look at other fans being salty of all the talent Inter Miami's able to gather, and you kind of think to yourself, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because if you invest this much in your attack and you have, a midfielder that's a DP, you shouldn't be able to have a guy like Mikael, and Inter Miami found a way to make it happen. So fantastic signing. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition. I think he's not going to change our lives because I'm worried he's going to be so good this year that we're not going to be able to keep him. But for this year, I think he's going to be an excellent addition to help us win the trophies that we're trying to win.
Huge for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. He brings that depth of experience both in the MLS, but as you said, going up against potentially better forward line, more creative, more free-flowing forward line in the conference that he played with Palmeiras. I think it's going to be such a interesting experience for him, and I would love to see how he translates some of those skills in the CONCACAF, in the MLS. And yeah, just it seems like a very well-rounded player. I don't want to say he's not good at I don't want to say that he's not exceptional at some stuff, but just really good at everything. But I think he's like exceptional in a lot of the categories as well. I don't want to
He
make
could
it
be.
just now, but he could be the way that
Could be.
I've seen him carry himself on the pitch. So I also think there's a huge ceiling for this player, and we've only just scratched the surface with what he could bring to the team. So might just be my signing of the offseason.
This is the guy we've been looking for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
We've tried to bring in Nico Frede and David Martinez and Maxi Falcone and Gonzalo, and it's like this is the guy that we were looking for with all of those players.
This is the
Tortadio,
Kamamale replacement.
I
Maybe even
think he's going to
better.
be much better. I think he's going to be
Yeah,
much better.
maybe
than
even
Kamamale.
better.
Yeah, like a real improvement. His partner, I think it's going to be Maxi Falcone this weekend. Mostly, it has to be because Noah Allen's going to start at left back. So we're looking at Falcone and Mikael. I think this is what they're going to go into the season as their starting pair. It makes a lot of sense. Right-sided center back, left-sided center back. What we saw from Maxi Falcone from a toughness and intelligence and playmaking defensively perspective at the end of last season, I thought was exceptional, and he had some really high moments. He was excellent in the Club World Cup as well. It was very inconsistent for the first 80% of the season, and then he really locked in the last 2 months, including the playoffs, and he was awesome. But I do think we will think back on his year last year and think he was just awesome in the playoffs, and that's what he was. But it was very inconsistent for much of the season. And so let's talk about Maxi Falcone. Who are we going to get this year? Do you think it was adjusting to the league? Do you think it was the games are too easy for me in these regular season MLS games? I don't need to prepare as hard. Whatever, I'm being sarcastic, but like, do you think we're going to get the more consistent version of him, and it just took him a while to fully bring himself into the team, or are we looking? Is he just an inconsistent player? What do you think?
I think the former. He came into his own in the last 2 months, and maybe it's a little bit of a disservice to say that he was highly inconsistent. I think his highs were very high and his lows were really low, but I will say over the course of the season, he had a lot more highs than he had lows by the end of it. I would say 70-30 would be my percentage and how he played. 70% positive, 30% maybe in some games he didn't necessarily put the best foot forward. Yes, to the point that it took him time to understand the league. Yes, to the point that maybe it was a little too easy for him, but more so for me, I think it was the partnerships that he was asked to play with. There was so much change. We talk about Javi Marchand rotating, but he took his time with the centre-back partnership. Initially, we went into the season, there's no doubt in my mind that Gonzalo Lujan was supposed to be a starter. That in itself, I think, adds to the pressure that Maxi Falcone has to go through because he's covering for a partner who's not necessarily playing particularly well, isn't embedded into the squad the same way, is prone to make mistakes. There were issues there. He was playing with multiple different partners. I think the biggest asset that we're going to see this season is the level of confidence that he now has about the level of performances that he can put in on a day-to-day basis, but more so, playing next to Mikael, I think is going to be really good for him. With what I've seen, and I mentioned this, not to make this about Mikael, but it looks like Mikael takes responsibility to command the backline. And I think Maxi Falcone is going to benefit from that because he's also that kind of a player. So the responsibility is going to be distributed evenly. It's not going to fall on him to try and clean up other players' mistakes. If he does make a mistake, he knows he can trust the partner next to him to to go in for that extra challenge, to go in and challenge for the ball in the midfield. If he loses, he knows he has somebody behind him who can cover up. Now, all of this is hypothetical depending on how they build the chemistry and how it plays out in actual games. But I do think he will benefit having a partner like Mikael with him. And the performances that we saw towards the end of the season, that's going to give him a lot of confidence. And that will be the expectation from himself, I believe, to perform game in and game out. So I think we're going to see a more consistent Maxi Falcon, especially because he might have a more consistent centre back partner now this season. And also, I think the performances that he put in at the end of the last season will be the benchmark for himself.
It'll be interesting. And I think you make a really interesting point about him and his partner. And I think when we saw him with Noah Allen at the end of the season, they made a dynamic partnership and it was really good. If this was a longer offseason, maybe we would have looked deeper into what all of that meant. But, it was a shorter offseason. I don't know. I'm just keeping my eye open. Keeping my eye open that he's just the type of player. Because he is 27, maybe 28 now. It's not like he was a 22-year-old coming through and finally hit the confidence level that allowed him to be consistent. Like, I just, I am keeping my eye open for Maxi Falcone being up and down. And I also am keeping my sort of mind open the fact that we might get a midfield partnership of Mikael and Noah Allen, or at least I'm interested in seeing what that would look like.
Centre-back partnership.
Sorry, center-back partnership. Very athletic, more size than we had last year. Better distribution than what we had last year, and like if you want rangy center backs that can recover, and if you want to play a high line, like those are your two quickest center backs. So I wonder what that would look like. They're both left-footed, so I'm not sure Javier Mascherano would do that, but I don't know why he wouldn't at least at some point. But that said, I think Maxi Falcone goes into the season as a starter, and deservedly so. So, yeah, we'll see what that looks like as the season evolves, but I'm keeping my eye open for it. And then the last one I have is Sergio Reguilon. He played at a lot of big clubs, but he didn't play a lot at a lot of big clubs. He played at a lot of big clubs. I remember watching him at Man United play like this 9-game sample where all their left backs were injured, and so he just played every game. And I remember thinking, like, this is a legitimate Premier League level left back. Not a superstar, not even one of the 20 best left backs in the league where he should be a starter somewhere, but like he's a legitimate Premier League left back. I don't know what that translates to, though, into the MLS, and I'm very interested and excited because I watch the Premier League on the weekend, and I think to myself, man, you make one bad touch, and it's like you got a bad game, and the fans will be upset with you. And then you compare that to what the MLS is, which is guys making mistakes all the time, and that you shouldn't be crucifying players for 2 mistakes a game. Like it's fine as long as it doesn't lead to losing games. So whereas in the Premier League, like everything is magnified because the players are so good and they're so athletic and they're so capable of taking advantage of your mistakes that anything can be a problem. So how does that translate to Sergio Reguilon in the MLS? I don't know. I'm very curious to find out. We said this when we signed him. Like, I think there's a chance he's the best left back in the MLS this year. I think there's a chance that he's league average, maybe 12th best left back in the league this year. And there's also a chance he doesn't play a ton, which we were hoping wasn't reality. But this guy seems to have a radar for the aliens to come grab him. So what do you think we're going to get out of Sergio Reguilon this year?
I don't even know if I can answer that question. In all honesty, I'll answer your question with questions, right? There is quality there. He's a very quality player. He is good on the ball, is sharp with his passing, has good crossing ability. Defensively, he can do a good job as well. Positioning-wise, he's fine. As you said, a very serviceable left back in the Premier League. How does that translate to the MLS? My intuition suggests that should be good enough for him. I think he should be able to translate really well to the MLS and potentially be the top 5 left back in the league. All speculation, all hypothesis. We'll have to see how he plays. We saw 30 seconds of him in the preseason, so it's not even like we were able to see what he could potentially bring before he got injured. He hasn't played a ton of minutes in a while, so that could be a potential factor as well. But the biggest question mark is injury. Alien invasion. If he doesn't stay healthy, then If he
Hopefully
doesn't
there's
stay
no
healthy,
invasion.
then abduction. My bad, not invasion. Invasion means we basically put up our club for sale. Um, Now, the alien abduction is the biggest issue for me because the best ability is availability, right? And if he's not available, then he's a non-factor. So health is going to be a big concern for Sergio Reguilon, and I really hope he can stay fit because I believe that if he stays fit, he'll be a good player for us.
Yeah, I mean it's we just don't know yet. We just don't know
No, no,
yet. We
yeah,
didn't get
yeah.
to see enough before he went down. Okay, last topic before we get to predictions. Bouncing around a lot in this episode, but let's go back to the midfield. Is the midfield good enough for this team? This team wants to win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and they want to win other things on top of that. We talked about Rodrigo de Paul, Yannick Bright, David Ajala, David Ruiz as your sort of fourth option. Is the midfield good enough to accomplish what they want to accomplish?
Absolutely. There's quality players there. Provided David Ajala turns out to be the player that we expect him to be, I think that's a very solid midfield. May even be the best midfield in the league, but there's a nuance there. There's a caveat there. This is athletic. This midfield is good enough. We're just going to have to overcome some of the offensive deficiencies that we've lost with Sergio Busquets leaving in other ways. But that doesn't mean that the midfield is not good enough to win the trophies and complete the challenges that we've set ourselves this season.
Well, it's certainly not going to be the best midfield in the league with the way they set up because they only play with two midfielders. As far as talent and like the personnel in your midfield grouping, and you throw in Segovia, if you throw in David, like I think you could have an argument there. But what the actual product is going to look like is going to be probably losing a lot of midfield battles because of the way you set up and getting overrun in the midfield. So the question is, can your midfielders be so good that they don't lose by that much and it allows your fantastic offense, your fantastic defense to go win you a bunch of games? That to me is the question. And so you look at what the team did this offseason. They said we're going to lose a lot of offense from our midfield when Sergio Busquets retires. We're going to lose a lot of offense from our back line when Jordi Alba retires. Let's go fix our defense. So our defense is fantastic. They got the best goalkeeper in the league, got a guy who I think could be the best defender in the league, Mikhail. And they replaced their fullbacks, and then they added Yannick Brighton to the lineup. You get David Ajala as a guy who's also very strong defensively. Like the midfield defensively, I think is rock solid. It's way better than it was last year. I think the back line defensively is going to be better than it was last year. And I think the goalkeeper, in terms of shot stopping, is going to be way better than we had last year. So defensively, they should be much better. I think if you put all those things together, that does equal a much better defensive team. And then it's, can the offense find ways to create enough goals, which is sort of a similar story that we had last year, except we upgraded our defense. So I feel like they took an approach that makes a lot of sense, and we will find out if it works out for them. But I kind of like it. I kind of like it a lot. Stronger in the midfield, stronger defensively, stronger goalkeeper. Leads me to think this midfield will be strong enough to do what Inter Miami needs to do this year. And, as you like to remind us, when you're in tournament play, what helps you win?
Defense.
I'm excited about this season. I want to do one prediction based on what we just talked about. Last year, Inter Miami gave up 55 goals in the MLS. The year before, they gave up 49, just to give you some reference points. So in 2024, they gave up 49 MLS goals, 34 regular season games. Last year was 55 and 34 regular season MLS games. How many goals this year, on the record, will Inter Miami give up in 2026 in the MLS to give us a sense of how good this defense will be?
I think the MLS record last season was 40-41. It was Philadelphia, I believe.
The best defenses will hold 38, 39, 40, 41 goals in that range.
I'm going to say 45. Inter Miami is going to concede 45 goals.
That's a big improvement from last year. 10-goal difference could win you.
Yeah.
A 10-goal difference in your defensive production would have won them the Supporters' Shield last year.
I think a lot of the issues last season were also we lost by big margins in some of the games. I think that's going to happen less. So we're not going to lose by 6 to Cincinnati or 4 to Orlando. I hope. And that's going to, I think, help keep the numbers low. I still don't think it's going to be the best defense in the league just by the nature with which Inter Miami plays. But I think it's going to be really good. It's going to be a solid backline or a solid defense. Give me a number, man.
I think it's gonna be a top 3 defense in the league. I think they gave up 41 goals. I think it's gonna be
That's a good number.
A dramatic improvement from last year. I think they're gonna be top 3 in the league. And I think if we get to the end of the season, we're gonna be looking at the defense as the thing that really helped us get a lot of extra points. We're gonna do our prediction show tomorrow or sometime this week, where we're going to go out and talk about what we think the Eastern Conference is going to look like, who's going to win all the trophies and all that stuff. But I think Inter Miami's going to have a top 3 defense this year in the MLS. And if that's the case, you can start getting really excited about what's possible for this team.
I just want it to play out in the field now, man. I'm done talking in predictions. I'm done talking in what this team could potentially be in the pitch. I just want them to go out, play, and win every game. We're there. We're almost there. One more episode, and then we're straight to the first game of the season. Very excited for it. I look forward to that game. I look forward to that pregame show. Before that, we'll do one more episode just to get warmed up.
It's game week, guys. I hope you guys are all ready. Hope you enjoy your, you're celebrating Washington's birthday the way it's supposed to be celebrated, in whatever that means for you. Guys, we will see you again next time. I hope you have a lovely day. Until then, ciao. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful